The moon hung like a silver dollar over the Colorado prairie, casting long shadows across the weathered wood of the Morrison ranch house. Inside, Eleanor Ellie Whitfield sat rigid before the cracked mirror, her mother's trembling hands weaving white ribbons through her auburn hair. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Silas Morrison, wife to a man 30 years her senior, whose hands were as rough as his temperament and whose breath reeked of whiskey and cruelty. "Hold still, child," her mother whispered, though her own fingers shook. "Mr. Morrison don't like waiting." Ellie stared at her reflection, pale skin made paler by the moonlight, green eyes that had lost their spark months ago when her father had shaken hands with Morrison over a bottle of cheap bourbon, sealing her fate like cattle at auction. The deal was simple: her hand in marriage for enough money to save their failing horse ranch from the bank's clutches. Through the thin walls, she could hear her father's ragged cough. The consumption that ate at his lungs had eaten away his pride, too. Once, Thomas Whitfield had been a proud man, breaking wild mustangs with gentle hands. Now he was just another desperate rancher, selling the only thing of value he had left: his daughter. The wedding dress hung on the door like a shroud. It had been Morrison's first wife's. She'd died in childbirth, along with the baby, though some whispered darker tales about bruises that couldn't be hidden by powder and paint. Ellie had met Morrison exactly 3 times. Once when he'd come to inspect her like horseflesh, checking her teeth and running his thick fingers through her hair. Once when the engagement was announced at the town church, his grip on her arm leaving marks that lasted a week, and once last Sunday when he'd cornered her behind her father's barn, pressing his whiskey-soaked mouth against hers until she'd bitten his lip hard enough to draw blood. "You'll learn to mind me better once we're wed," he'd snarled, backhanding her so hard her ears rang. "I paid good money for you, girl. You'll give me what I'm owed." Now, as midnight approached, Ellie made her decision. Her mother had finally retired, exhausted from preparations. Her father lay unconscious, the laudanum doing its work. The house creaked and settled in the prairie wind, moving like a ghost. Ellie pulled on her riding boots and stuffed what little money she'd hidden, $7.32, into a small leather pouch. She grabbed hardtack biscuits from the kitchen, filled a canteen from the water barrel, and wrapped them in a blanket roll. Every movement was calculated, every breath measured. In a final act of defiance, she put on the wedding dress. Let them find it on the prairie, she thought. Let Morrison know she'd rather die in white than live in his shadow. The stable door protested with a low groan. Buttercup, her father's gentlest mare, nickered softly in recognition. Ellie had raised her from a foal, and the horse nuzzled her hand, sensing distress. "Quiet now, girl," Ellie whispered, her hand steady as she saddled the mare. "We're leaving this place behind." She led Buttercup out slowly, walking her past the house until they reached the open prairie. Only then did she mount, gathering the white fabric of the dress and tucking it around her legs. The moon illuminated the vast emptiness before her, endless grassland stretching toward the distant mountains, a sea of silver and shadow. Ellie had no real plan beyond escape. Fort Collins lay to the north, but Morrison had friends there. Denver was east, but too far. West meant the mountains and certain death for someone unprepared. South led to the Badlands, Comanche territory. Her father had warned, but Comanche raids seemed less frightening than Morrison's bed. She urged Buttercup into a gallop, the wedding dress billowing behind her like wings. The wind tore at her carefully arranged hair, pulling the ribbons free until they flew away like small white birds. For the first time in months, Ellie felt something close to freedom. Dawn came too soon, painting the prairie in shades of pink and gold. Buttercup had slowed to a walk, foam flecking her mouth. Ellie's own throat burned with thirst. She'd been too afraid to stop for water, imagining Morrison's men already on her trail. The landscape had changed. The familiar grasslands gave way to red rock formations and sparse vegetation. Somewhere in the night, she'd lost the trail. The mountains seemed no closer, and the morning sun revealed nothing but empty wilderness in every direction. By midday, the heat was oppressive. The white dress, so defiant in moonlight, now felt like a trap, absorbing every ray of sun. Ellie had long since drunk the last of her water. Buttercup stumbled more frequently, her head hanging low. They found a small cluster of cottonwoods that promised shade and perhaps water, but the stream bed was dry, only cracked mud showing where water once flowed. Ellie slid from the saddle, her legs barely holding her. She loosened Buttercup's girth and tied her to a tree branch, then collapsed in the meager shade. The wedding dress was now stained with sweat and dust. Ellie laughed, a cracked sound in the silent air. What a bride she made, lost, dying of thirst. Her grand escape ending not with freedom but with vultures circling overhead. The afternoon sun was merciless. Ellie drifted in and out of consciousness, her tongue swollen, her lips cracked and bleeding. In her delirium, she saw Morrison's face, heard her father's cough, felt her mother's tears. She tried to rise, but her legs wouldn't obey. Then, the sound of hooves. Terror gave her strength. Morrison had found her. She struggled to stand, to run, but the world spun and she fell hard. The breath knocked from her lungs. The hoofbeats grew closer, steady and unhurried. Through blurred vision, she saw a rider approaching, tall, dark against the burning sky. Not Morrison's bulk, but lean and straight in the saddle. As consciousness faded, she glimpsed a face marked by sun and wind, long black hair bound with leather, and eyes dark as midnight watching her with an expression she couldn't read. The last thing Ellie remembered was strong arms lifting her from the ground, the scent of sage and leather, and a voice speaking words in a language she didn't understand. Then darkness claimed her, and the bride in white surrendered to whatever fate awaited. Consciousness returned slowly, like morning mist lifting from a river. Ellie's throat burned, but cool water trickled past her lips, not enough to choke her, just enough to ease the fire. She tried to open her eyes, but they felt weighted with sand. Panic seized her as memory crashed back. The prairie, the heat, the rider. She jerked upright, or tried to. Gentle but firm hands pressed her shoulders back down. A voice spoke, low, careful, in accented English. "Be still. You are safe." This time her eyes opened. She lay on a bed of soft furs in what appeared to be a natural cave formation. Daylight filtered through a narrow opening, revealing smooth red rock walls decorated with faded paintings of horses and buffalo. The air smelled of sage smoke and something else. Wild mint, perhaps? The man sitting beside her was the rider from her fevered memory. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 winters. His face bore the strong, angular features of the Comanche, skin burnished by sun and wind. He wore a simple leather shirt and leggings, a knife at his belt. His dark eyes watched her with cautious intensity. Fear should have consumed her. Every story she'd heard about the Comanche involved scalping, torture, women taken as slaves. But something in his careful movements, the way he'd pulled back when she'd startled, spoke of restraint rather than threat. "Water," he said, lifting a gourd to her lips again. Slow. She drank, this time managing to swallow without choking. The cave spun less violently. When she'd had enough, she found her voice, cracked though it was. Are you going to—" "Kill you?" He set the gourd aside, his expression unreadable. "If I wanted you dead, I would have left you for the sun." He gestured toward the cave opening. "Your horse, she is outside, fed, watered." Relief flooded through her. Buttercup was safe. Then another thought struck. The wedding dress. She looked down to find herself still wearing it, though someone had loosened the corset strings so she could breathe properly. Heat rushed to her cheeks. "I did not." He seemed to search for words. "A woman helped." "From my band. She is gone now." Ellie struggled to sit up again, and this time he didn't stop her. The movement made her head swim, but she forced herself to focus. "Why did you save me?" He was quiet for a long moment. then moved to tend a small fire near the cave wall. You were dying. It is not our way to let the innocent perish when we can prevent it. But I'm white. I thought— She stopped, realizing how her words sounded. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, though it held no warmth. Yes, you thought we kill all whites, just as your people think many things about us that are not true. He added dried herbs to a pot over the fire. Some of my people would have left you, but He trailed off, and in the silence, Ellie studied him more carefully. There was something familiar about his face, something that tugged at memory like a half-remembered dream. What's your name? She asked finally. I am called Dakota. It means friend to everyone, in your tongue. The irony in his voice was sharp, though few whites would call me friend. I'm Eleanor. Ellie? She hesitated. Thank you for saving me. He nodded, returning his attention to the pot. Soon, the smell of brewing herbs filled the cave. He poured the tea into a carved wooden cup and brought it to her. Drink. It will help with the sun sickness. The tea was bitter but soothing. As she sipped, Ellie became more aware of her surroundings. The cave was clearly a temporary shelter, supplies stacked neatly. Weapons hung on the walls, but nothing permanent. Through the opening, she could see red rock formations and scrub brush. No sign of the grasslands she knew. Where are we? 2 days' ride from where I found you. Hidden. He sat cross-legged near the fire, maintaining distance between them. Your people search for you. Her stomach clenched. Morrison? The old rancher with many men. They follow your trail like wolves. Dakota's expression darkened. They speak of bringing back his bride. They do not speak kindly. Ellie pulled the dirty wedding dress tighter around herself. I'm not his bride. I'll never be his bride. I'd rather die. You nearly did. His gaze was steady. Why do you run from your own kind? The question hung between them. How could she explain to this stranger, this Comanche warrior, about being sold like property, about Morrison's cruel hands and whiskey breath, about a father too weak and desperate to protect his daughter? My father owed money. Morrison agreed to pay the debt if I married him. But She swallowed hard. He's a brutal man. His first wife died. Some say he killed her. Dakota's jaw tightened. So your father trades you for gold. To save our ranch. He's dying. Consumption. He thought. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. It doesn't matter what he thought. I ran, and I'll keep running. To where? You have no water, no food, no knowledge of this land. The desert does not forgive ignorance. She had no answer. In her desperation to escape, she hadn't thought beyond the immediate flight. Now, faced with the vast wilderness and Morrison's pursuit, the hopelessness of her situation crashed over her. Dakota rose and moved to the cave opening, scanning the horizon. They search north of here, but they will expand their circle. You cannot stay here long. Then I'll leave. I don't want to bring trouble to you. He turned back to her, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something. Memory? In his eyes. You do not remember. Remember what? 10 summers ago, the trading post at Bent's Fort. Your father brought horses to trade. He moved closer, his movements careful, unthreatening. A young white girl with red hair like sunset. She gave water to a Comanche boy whose mother was sick with fever, shared her bread. The memory hit her like a physical blow. She'd been 8 years old, traveling with her father on one of his trading runs. There had been a Comanche family at the fort. Outcasts. Someone had said, seeking medicine for the woman's fever. The other whites had refused to help, but Ellie had snuck them water and food from her father's supplies. The boy had been about 13, tall for his age, with serious dark eyes that seemed to hold too much pain for someone so young. He'd said nothing, but when their hands had touched over the water bucket, he'd given her a small carved wooden horse. She still had it, hidden in a drawer at home. That was you, she breathed. My mother lived because of your kindness. She passed 3 winters ago, but she lived. Dakota moved back to his place by the fire. I do not forget debts. They sat in silence as shadows lengthened outside the cave. Ellie finished the tea, feeling strength slowly return to her limbs. As night approached, Dakota prepared a simple meal: dried meat, wild roots, and flatbread. They ate without speaking, but the silence had shifted from wary to something almost comfortable. As darkness fell, he gestured to the fur bedding. Sleep, I will keep watch. You don't trust me. I do not trust Morrison's men not to search at night. Rest. Tomorrow we must decide what to do. Ellie lay back on the furs, exhaustion pulling at her despite everything. The wedding dress felt like chains around her, but she had nothing else to wear. As she drifted toward sleep, she watched Dakota's profile against the dying firelight, strong, watchful, carrying his own burdens. Why did you really save me? She asked softly. It wasn't just about the water, was it? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, that day at the fort, you looked at me and saw a person, not a savage, not an enemy, just a boy worried for his mother. His voice dropped lower. In 10 years, no other white has looked at me that way. Ellie closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those words. In the morning, she would have to face reality. Morrison's pursuit, her lack of options, the impossible situation she'd created. But tonight, in this hidden cave with an unlikely protector, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: safety. The third dawn in the cave brought troubling news. Dakota returned from his morning scout with grim features, settling beside the cold fire pit with unusual heaviness. Ellie had grown accustomed to reading his subtle expressions. The slight tightening around his eyes meant danger. Morrison's men, she said. It wasn't a question. Closer. They found your horse's tracks where I left the main trail. He pulled dried venison from his pack, handing her a piece. We cannot stay. Ellie forced herself to chew the tough meat, though her stomach churned. The wedding dress, now stained beyond recognition, felt like a beacon marking her for capture. Where can we go? I can't return home. And you, your people, would not welcome you. He stated it simply, without cruelty. A white woman in our camp would bring the soldiers. My chief forbids it. They prepared to leave in tense silence. Dakota had traded her impractical wedding shoes for soft leather moccasins that belonged to his late mother. The dress remained. They had nothing else that would fit her, but he showed her how to tie it up for riding, binding the excess fabric with leather cords. As they emerged from the cave into pre-dawn darkness, Buttercup nickered softly in greeting. Beside her stood Dakota's mount, a magnificent paint stallion with intelligent eyes. Ellie noticed how gently Dakota handled both animals, speaking to them in his language with quiet affection. They rode south, away from Morrison's search pattern, keeping to rocky ground that wouldn't hold tracks. The landscape shifted from redstone to scrubland, dotted with mesquite and sage. Despite the danger, Ellie found herself mesmerized by the harsh beauty of this country she'd been taught to fear. As the sun climbed higher, Dakota suddenly reined in his horse. Someone comes! Ellie's heart hammered, but he seemed puzzled rather than alarmed. 3 riders approached from the east. Comanche. By their bearing and dress, Dakota's posture shifted to something defensive as they drew near. The lead rider, an older warrior with scars marking years of battle, spoke sharply in Comanche. Ellie couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear: anger, accusation. Dakota responded calmly, gesturing toward her, but the older man cut him off with a harsh laugh. He says I am a fool, Dakota translated quietly, that helping you will bring death to our people. The scarred warrior switched to broken English, addressing Ellie directly. White woman bring white soldiers, always same. You go back your people? I can't, Ellie said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. They'll force me to marry a man who beats women, who might kill me. The warrior spat. White man's business, not ours. The younger riders watched silently, their faces unreadable. Dakota spoke again in Comanche, his voice taking on an edge. The argument escalated. hands moving to weapons, until the older warrior said something that made Dakota go rigid. "What did he say?" Ellie whispered. "He questions my loyalty, says my mother's death made me weak, that I shame her memory by helping our enemies." Dakota's knuckles were white on his reins. "He is wrong." The confrontation ended with the three riders wheeling away, but not before the scarred warrior called back words that needed no translation. A warning, perhaps a threat. They watched until the riders disappeared over a distant ridge. "Your people will cast you out for this," Ellie said softly. "Perhaps." He turned his horse southward again. "Come, I know a place." They rode through the heat of the day, stopping only to water the horses at a hidden spring. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they climbed into rougher country, a maze of canyons and mesas that seemed to swallow them whole. Finally, as the sun touched the western horizon, Dakota led them up a narrow trail to a natural shelter carved by wind and time. It was more than a cave, almost a dwelling. Someone had built a partial wall of stones across the opening, leaving gaps for windows and a door. Inside, remains of old fires marked a cooking area. Faded symbols decorated the walls. "My mother's secret place," Dakota explained. Seeing her wonder, "She came here to pray, to be alone. My father never knew, only she and I." He showed her the hidden spring that trickled down the back wall, pooling in a natural basin. Dried herbs hung from wooden pegs. Clay pots held seeds and roots. It was a sanctuary, carefully maintained despite years of absence. That night, as they shared a meal of rabbit Dakota had snared, Ellie asked the question that had haunted her all day. "Why are you risking everything for me? Really?" He fed small sticks to the fire, taking his time answering. "You asked why I saved you. I said because of the water, the kindness. This is truth, but not all truth." She waited, learning that his silences often held more meaning than words. "That today at the trading post, I watched you before. You played with the Mexican children, shared food with the black freedmen, spoke gently to the Chinese railroad workers." He looked up, firelight dancing in his dark eyes. "You saw people, just people. My mother taught me that, before she died. Most whites do not learn this lesson. They see only savage, slave, stranger, enemy." He paused. "When I found you in that dress, dying in the desert, I thought, here is test from the spirits. Save the enemy's daughter, or let desert claim her. And you chose to save me. I chose to see the girl with kind hands, not the white woman." His voice dropped. "But now..." He stood abruptly, moving to check the horses, an obvious deflection. Ellie followed, unwilling to let the moment pass. In the soft twilight, with the desert painting itself in purples and golds, she touched his arm. He froze at the contact. She felt the tension in his muscles, saw the conflict in his profile. "Now I see the woman," he said roughly, "and this is dangerous." Her heart stuttered. "Why?" He turned to face her fully, and she saw raw honesty in his expression. "Because you cannot stay in my world, and I cannot enter yours. Because your people would hang me for looking at you. Because my people already call me traitor for saving you. I don't belong to anyone's world anymore," she said. "I'm already outcast. You do not understand what you say. Your father will forgive. Morrison will find another bride. You can return to be sold again? To watch my father drink himself to death with guilt? To pretend I never learned what freedom tastes like?" Her voice rose with each word. "I'd rather die in this desert than live in that cage." They stood close now, close enough that she could see the pulse at his throat, smell the sage and leather scent of him. The moment stretched taut between them, full of impossible possibility. A coyote's howl broke the spell. Dakota stepped back, his walls rebuilding. "You should sleep. Tomorrow we must find solution." But sleep eluded her. Ellie lay on the bed of furs he'd prepared, staring at the star-drunk sky visible through the shelter's opening. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Morrison's cruel face, felt his bruising grip. Then she'd open them to find Dakota keeping watch, his silhouette strong and steady against the night. Near midnight, unable to bear the silence. She spoke. "Tell me about your mother." He glanced back at her, perhaps surprised to find her awake. After a moment, he moved closer, settling with his back against the wall where he could see both her and the entrance. She was medicine woman, healer, but different. She saw visions, spoke with spirits. A soft smile touched his lips. My father said she was touched by Moon, too gentle for warrior's wife, but he loved her beyond reason. How did she die? Sickness, not white man's disease, something in her chest that ate her breath. She knew it would come, told me seasons before. He picked up a small object from the ground, a piece of quartz that caught moonlight. Said I would face choice between two worlds, that love would make choice for me. Ellie's breath caught. Did she say which world? No, only that I would know when time came. He set down the stone, looking directly at her. I think time is now. The weight of his words settled between them. Outside, wind sang through the canyon, carrying scents of sage and coming rain. The first drops began to fall, soft as whispers on stone. I'm frightened, Ellie admitted. Not of you, of tomorrow, of having nowhere to go. Fear is wise, but you are stronger than you know. Woman who runs into desert wearing wedding dress. This takes curious courage. Despite everything, she laughed, a small, broken sound. Or curious madness, perhaps same thing. He moved closer still, though careful not to touch. Ellie, I make promise, while you stay here. You are under my protection. No harm will find you. And when I can't stay here anymore? He had no answer for that. They both knew the truth, that this shelter was borrowed time, that the world beyond these walls would never accept what grew between them in the firelight. But for now, with rain beginning to drum harder on stone and the desert washing clean around them, now was enough. Ellie finally slept as the storm passed over, her dreams filled with wild horses and endless skies. Dakota's watchful presence the only constant in a world turned upside down. When she woke near dawn, she found he had covered her with his own blanket, though it meant he'd spent the cold night hours with nothing but his leather shirt for warmth. The gesture spoke louder than any words. In saving her, he had already chosen his path. Now she had to decide if she was brave enough to walk it with him. The week following the storm passed in a strange rhythm of domestic peace and underlying tension. Ellie learned to grind mesquite beans into flour, to identify edible plants, to move silently across the rocky ground. Dakota taught with patience, his hands guiding hers as she practiced with the bow, showing her how to read tracks in the dust. But it was the evenings that became dangerous, when firelight softened the harsh edges of their reality, when conversation drifted from survival to dreams, when accidental touches lingered a heartbeat too long. On the 7th night, Dakota returned from hunting with troubling news written in the set of his shoulders. He laid the deer carcass outside and entered the shelter, not meeting her eyes. Morrison has hired Apache scouts, he said without preamble. They will find this place. Ellie's hand stilled on the basket she was weaving, a skill his mother had perfected here. When? Days, maybe less. He moved to the wall where his weapons hung, checking each methodically. You must go. Go where? She stood, anger flaring. We've discussed this. I have nowhere. There is place. Fort Sumner. They take in women who... He struggled with the words. Women who need shelter. Missionaries run it. A brothel. You want me to... No. His voice was sharp. Christian women. They protect those who flee from bad situations. You would be safe. I would be caged. Again. She moved closer to him, forcing him to look at her. Is that what you want? To send me away? His control finally cracked. What I want. He gripped her shoulders, not roughly but with desperate intensity. I want impossible things. I want to wake beside you without fear. I want to walk in daylight without hiding. I want... He cut himself off, releasing her as if burned. But Ellie caught his hands, holding them between her own. Tell me, she whispered. Say it. I want you. The words emerged raw, torn from someplace deep. Every sunrise I watch you wake. I want you more. When you laugh at my poor English. When you curse the fire for smoking. When you braid your hair with those quick fingers." He pulled his hands free, backing away. "But wanting changes nothing. It changes everything." Ellie followed, matching each of his retreating steps. "Dakota, No!" His back hit the wall. "You do not understand. My people have word, maheo. It means caught between. This is what we are, what we will always be. Then we make our own place. Neither white nor Comanche, just us." "Just us?" His laugh was bitter. "Where? How do we live? I cannot farm your people's land. They would not sell to me. You cannot follow the buffalo with my tribe. We would be together," she finished. "We would be together." The space between them evaporated. Later, she wouldn't remember who moved first, only that suddenly his mouth was on hers, fierce and desperate, tasting of wild honey and impossibility. Her hands tangled in his long hair, pulling him closer as he pressed her against the cool stone wall. It was nothing like Morrison's whiskey-soaked assault. This was mutual hunger, mutual need. When Dakota's lips moved to her throat, when his hands spanned her waist, she arched against him with a soft sound that made him groan. "Ellie!" He breathed against her skin, her name a prayer and a plea. Thunder crashed overhead, another storm rolling in. It broke the spell. Dakota wrenched himself away, chest heaving. In the lightning's flash, she saw anguish in his eyes. "This is why you must go," he said hoarsely, "before we do something that cannot be undone." But Ellie was past the point of careful choices. The week of tension, of careful distances and stolen glances, had built to this moment. She stepped forward again, her hands flat against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palms. "What if I want it to be undone? What if I want—" "You don't know what you ask." But his hands covered hers, holding them against him. "Your innocence is mine to give." She met his gaze steadily. "Or are you like Morrison, thinking you know better than me what I should want?" The comparison made him flinch. "I am nothing like him. Then stop making choices for me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Please." The rain began in earnest, drumming against stone, turning the desert silver. In the shelter's dim light, they stood frozen, balanced on a knife's edge. Ellie saw the moment his resolve shattered, saw acceptance replace anguish in his dark eyes. This time when he kissed her, it was slower, deeper, a claiming and a surrender both. His hands were gentle as they unpinned what remained of her matted hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. She tugged at the laces of his shirt, needing to feel skin against skin. "Are you certain?" he asked one last time, forehead pressed to hers. "I've never been more certain of anything." He lifted her easily, carrying her to the bed of furs. The ruined wedding dress, symbol of everything she'd fled, fell away like shed skin. In its place, she found a different kind of union. Not ownership, but partnership. Not taking, but sharing. Dakota's hands shook as they mapped her body, reverent and careful. He whispered in both languages, promises and endearments that needed no translation. When thunder shook the canyon walls, when lightning illuminated their entwined forms, it felt like the world itself bore witness to what they were creating. Afterward, they lay breathless, limbs entangled, sweat cooling on fevered skin. Ellie traced the scars on his chest, marks of raids and hunts, stories written in flesh. He caught her hand, kissing each finger. "What have we done?" he murmured, though his tone held wonder rather than regret. "What was always going to happen?" She replied, "From the moment you found me. The Apache scouts will find us, or they won't. Morrison will take me back, or he won't." She turned in his arms to face him fully. "But this, what we have tonight, no one can take this." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "There is a way." "What?" "Old way. Comanche marriage. No white priest, no papers. Just promise made under sky." His fingers combed through her tangled hair. "It would mean nothing to your people or mine. But to us—" "Yes," she said before he could finish. "Yes, They rose, wrapping themselves in blankets, despite the storm. Dakota led her outside to a ledge where the full fury of the night could witness. Rain soaked them instantly, but neither cared. Speaking in Comanche first, then English, Dakota made his vow, "Under sky's eye, with storm as witness, I take you as wife. Your enemies are my enemies. Your path is my path. Until the stars fall, until the mountains crumble, you are mine as I am yours." Ellie had no ancient words, only truth. "I choose you, Dakota. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because there's nowhere else I want to be. I promise to stand beside you, to face whatever comes, to love you in darkness and in light, forever." Lightning split the sky as they kissed, sealing promises that no law would recognize, but that felt more binding than any courthouse certificate. They made love again as the storm raged, this time with the desperate passion of those who know dawn brings danger. Every touch was precious, every gasp and sigh a rebellion against the world that would tear them apart. When morning came, gray and subdued after the night's violence, they lay watching the sunrise paint the wet rocks in shades of rose and gold. Reality crept back with the light. Morrison, the scouts, the impossible future. But for these moments, they had carved out a space where only they existed. "Whatever happens," Ellie said softly, "I regret nothing." Dakota pulled her closer, pressing his lips to her hair. "Nor I, though the price, we'll pay it, together." But even as she spoke bravely, they both heard it. The distant sound of horses. Many horses. The scouts had been swifter than expected. Their time had run out. The hoofbeats grew closer as Dakota moved with practiced efficiency, gathering weapons and supplies. Ellie dressed quickly in the Comanche clothing he'd traded for days ago, a soft doe-skin dress and leggings that allowed for easier movement than her ruined wedding gown. "How many?" she asked, braiding her hair with trembling fingers. 8, maybe 10. He handed her a knife. Apache scouts in front, Morrison's men behind. They fled through the back passage Dakota's mother had used for escape, leading the horses through narrow defiles that scraped their flanks. Behind them, shouts echoed off canyon walls as the trackers found their abandoned shelter. For 3 days they ran, sleeping in snatches, eating while riding. Dakota used every trick, doubling back, crossing water, laying false trails, but the Apache scouts were skilled, and Morrison's determination was absolute. On the 4th dawn, exhaustion forced them to rest in a grove of cottonwoods beside a muddy stream. The horses stood with heads hanging, foam dried white on their coats. Ellie dozed against Dakota's shoulder while he kept watch, his rifle across his knees. "We cannot run much longer," he said quietly. "The horses will die. Then we make our stand. You could still—" "No." She straightened, meeting his gaze. "Whatever comes, we face it together. That was our vow." He kissed her fiercely, tasting of dust and desperation. When they parted, his eyes held the wild light of a man prepared for death. "Then we choose our ground." They rode hard for Devil's Canyon, a box canyon Dakota knew from hunting expeditions. Steep walls, only one way in or out, a place for last stands. As the sun reached its zenith, they made their preparations. Dakota positioned rifles among the rocks, showed Ellie angles of fire, kissed her between instructions. She tried to memorize everything, the scar through his left eyebrow, the way he moved like smoke, how he smiled when he thought she wasn't looking. The dust cloud appeared by afternoon. Morrison rode at the front, his white hair and beard making him look like an avenging prophet. Beside him, 3 Apache scouts studied the canyon entrance with professional interest. Behind, 7 hired guns, hard men with harder eyes. "Eleanor Whitfield," Morrison's voice boomed across the space. "Come out, girl. This foolishness ends now." Dakota answered with a rifle shot that kicked up dirt at Morrison's feet. The old man's horse danced backward. "You're hiding behind a savage?" Morrison sneered. "Have you no shame? Your father weeps for the dishonor you've brought." "My father sold me to pay his debts." Ellie shouted back. "I owe him nothing. You owe me." Morrison's facade of control cracked. "I paid good money for you. You're mine by law. Your law. Dakota called out. Not ours. Morrison squinted at the rocks. That you, Breed? Heard about you. The tame Comanche who thinks he's white. Hand her over and I might let you live. She is my wife. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Morrison laughed, an ugly sound that echoed off stone. Your wife? You think your heathen rituals mean anything? He turned to his men. Burn them out. What followed was chaos. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Ellie fired and reloaded with hands that no longer shook. Dakota's quick training serving her well. The Apache scouts melted away early. This was white man's business, not worth dying for. 2 of Morrison's hired guns fell, then 3, but they were outnumbered. And ammunition wasn't infinite. As shadows lengthened, Dakota took a bullet through the shoulder. He kept firing, but blood soaked his shirt. Getting dark, he panted. They will rush us soon. Ellie tore strips from her dress to bind his wound. Then we take as many as we can. He caught her hand. No, you live. Not without you. Ellie, no! She gripped his face between her hands. You don't get to save me again. We survive together or... The sound of more horses interrupted her. Many horses. Both sides froze as riders poured into the canyon. Comanche warriors, painted for war. At their head rode the scarred warrior who had confronted Dakota days ago. Morrison's remaining men clustered together, suddenly outnumbered. The old man himself had gone pale. The scarred warrior, standing bare. Dakota whispered, rode forward slowly. His eyes moved from Dakota's bloodied form to Ellie's protective position beside him. You bring war to our lands. Standing Bear said in accented English. White men with guns, hunting one of our people. He's harboring my property. Morrison sputtered. The woman is mine by law. Standing Bear's rifle swung toward him. Comanche law says woman chooses her man. She has chosen. He looked at Dakota. You claimed her as wife? Yes. Dakota answered firmly. Then she is Comanche now, under our protection. Standing Bear's smile was sharp. You want her, white man. Fight our whole band. Morrison's jaw worked furiously, but even he wasn't fool enough to challenge 30 armed warriors. This isn't over, he spat. I'll bring the army. Try. Standing Bear said simply. We know how to disappear, how to fight. Ask your army about Sand Creek, about adobe walls. He gestured to his warriors. Go, now. Do not return to our lands. For a moment, violence trembled on the edge of erupting. Then Morrison wheeled his horse around. You'll regret this, girl, when he tires of you, when you're old and broken from savage living. Ellie stood, stepping clear of the rocks. I regret nothing except the years I wasted in your world. Morrison's face purpled, but his men were already retreating. They watched until the dust cloud disappeared into darkness. Standing Bear dismounted, approaching Dakota with something like approval. You fought well, stupid, but well. He looked at Ellie. You shoot like warrior. Maybe you earn your place. She has earned it, Dakota said, swaying on his feet. Standing Bear caught him before he fell. We take you home, both. He paused. Your mother would be proud. She always said you would choose difficult path. They traveled through the night, Ellie riding beside the travois carrying Dakota. He drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering in both languages. She held his hand, whispering promises and prayers to any god who might listen. The Comanche camp materialized with dawn, tipis arranged in careful order, cook fires sending smoke into pale sky. Women and children emerged to stare at the white woman who rode with their warriors, but Standing Bear's presence kept them at a distance. The medicine man who tended Dakota's wound was ancient, his hands gentle but sure. He spoke no English, but his eyes were kind when he patted Ellie's shoulder. For 3 days, Dakota burned with fever. Ellie never left his side, bathing his face, forcing water between his lips. The women brought her food, showed her which herbs to use, slowly, warily. They began to accept her presence. On the 4th dawn, Dakota's eyes opened clear, Ellie, here. She kissed his forehead. Tasting salt, always here. The camp, they accepted. Standing Bear spoke for us. Said any woman who would fight beside her man had warrior's heart. She smiled through tears. I think I surprised them. You surprise everyone. He touched her face. No regrets. None. They stayed with the band through winter. Ellie learning the rhythms of Comanche life. It was hard, harder than anything she'd known. But when spring came, bringing Dakota's full recovery and news that Morrison had died of apoplexy, she felt only relief. One morning, as dawn painted the plains gold, Standing Bear approached their tipi. Scouts report new settlements coming. We must move deeper into mountains, harder living. He studied Ellie. You could leave, go back to easier life. Ellie emerged fully, her hair now worn in Comanche braids, her hands calloused from work but strong, inside the teepee. Dakota watched with quiet pride. This is my life, she said simply. These are my people now. Standing Bear nodded slowly. Then we remain strong. He walked away, but she caught his small smile. Dakota joined her outside, his arm sliding around her waist. Together they watched the camp wake. Their home, their people, their choice. No regrets? He asked again, as he did each dawn. Only one, she said, and felt him tense. Then she smiled. I should have run away sooner. His laughter rang across the plains, free and wild as the wind itself. In the distance, an eagle circled against endless sky, and Ellie knew with bone-deep certainty that she was finally, truly home. The celebration of Morrison's death was short-lived. Within a moon cycle, new troubles descended upon the band like locusts on summer wheat. A company of buffalo soldiers made camp 30 miles south, and white settlers pushed ever westward, bringing their hunger for land and their diseases. It was the fever that struck first. Ellie recognized the signs, the same wasting sickness that had claimed her mother years ago. Red spots, burning skin, delirium. The medicine man did what he could, but his herbs were meant for wounds and stomach pains, not the white man's pestilence. It's measles, she told Dakota as they watched another child's body wrapped for burial. I had it as a girl. Once survived, you cannot catch it again. His face was grave. How many will die? Without proper care? Many. She gripped his hands. But I know what helps. Cool water for the fever, willow bark tea, keeping them fed even when they won't eat. My mother's sister was a midwife. She taught me. Standing Bear was skeptical when she approached him. White medicine for white disease. Medicine is medicine, Ellie said firmly. Let me try. What followed were the longest days of her life among the Comanche. She worked tirelessly, moving from tipi to tipi, teaching the women how to care for their sick, how to recognize when the fever would break or when it turned deadly. Her limited Comanche vocabulary expanded rapidly. Words for symptoms, for comfort, for hope. Some still died, but many lived who might not have. When the fever finally passed, leaving the band weakened but intact, Standing Bear himself brought her a gift, a medicine bundle that had belonged to his grandmother. You are our medicine woman now, he said simply. The spirits work through you. But even as the band recovered, darker news arrived. The buffalo soldiers had been reinforced. Worse, they'd been joined by Texas Rangers with a specific mission to clear the Comanche from the region entirely. They want war, Dakota said after the council meeting. They will not wait for excuse. That night, as they lay entwined in their teepee, Ellie felt dread settling in her bones. What will we do? Fight, run, die maybe. His arms tightened around her. This is price of our choice. I would choose it again. I know. He kissed her temple. This is why I love you. The attack came at dawn 3 days later. Ellie woke to gunfire and screaming horses. Dakota was already moving, pushing his rifle into her hands while reaching for his own. Stay here, he commanded. Like hell. They emerged together into chaos. Soldiers in blue uniforms fired from horseback while rangers advanced on foot. Tippies burned. Women ran with children clutched to their chests. the air filled with smoke and the copper smell of blood. Ellie shot a ranger who was dragging a young woman by her hair. The man fell with a surprised expression, as if he couldn't believe a white woman would defend Indians. She felt nothing but grim satisfaction. The battle was fierce but brief. Outnumbered 3-1. The band scattered into the hills. Ellie found herself separated from Dakota in the smoke, riding hard with a group of women and children. Behind them, the camp burned. They regrouped in a box canyon 20 miles north. The losses were devastating. 15 warriors dead, including 2 of Standing Bear's sons. The chief sat like stone while his wives keened their grief. Dakota found her as darkness fell. He was bloodied but whole, and she sobbed with relief against his chest. "We cannot stay in these lands," Standing Bear announced when dawn broke over their makeshift camp. "The whites grow too many, too hungry. We go south, to Mexico lands, join our brothers there." It was exile, and everyone knew it. But the alternative was extinction. The journey south was a long funeral procession. They moved at night, hid during day. Game was scarce, water scarcer. The elderly began to fall behind. When Singing Crow, the ancient medicine man, could no longer ride, he simply walked into the desert one night and didn't return. "This is our way," Dakota explained when Ellie wept. "To choose the time of passing, to not burden the young. It's wrong. He could have lived another week, 2, while children go hungry because we move too slow." His voice was gentle but firm. "This is survival. Beloved, not your white towns with doctors and soft beds for the dying." She learned hard lessons on that journey. That honor sometimes meant choosing death. That love included letting go. That survival carved away everything unnecessary until only the essential remained. When they finally reached the Mexican territories, they were half their original number. The local bands welcomed them with mixture of pity and resignation. They too felt the squeeze of civilization. Ellie and Dakota built a new lodge on the outskirts of the combined camp. She continued her work as medicine woman, learning from Mexican curanderas who traded with the band. Her Spanish improved alongside her Comanche, until she dreamed in 3 languages. Spring brought unexpected joy. Her monthly bleeding ceased, and she knew what it meant before the physical signs showed. "A child," she whispered to Dakota one night, placing his hand on her still flat belly. His reaction was not what she expected. Fear flickered across his features before he mastered it. "The world we bring a child into will be the world we make for them." She turned in his arms to face him fully. "This child will know 3 people's ways. They will be bridge, not boundary. If they survive, they will." Her fierceness surprised them both, "because we will make sure of it." The pregnancy was difficult, without proper nutrition, fighting constant nausea while helping treat everything from snake bite to bullet wounds. Ellie pushed herself to dangerous limits. Dakota watched with growing alarm as she grew thin everywhere but her swelling middle. "You must rest," he pleaded after finding her collapsed by the river where she'd been gathering medicinal plants. "I can't. Little Flower has the coughing sickness, and Red Sky's wound isn't healing properly, and our child needs their mother alive." His voice cracked. "Please, Ellie, I cannot lose you." She saw then what she'd been too busy to notice. The deep shadows under his eyes, the way his hands shook when he thought she wasn't looking. This strong warrior who faced death without flinching was terrified of losing her to childbirth. "I promise to be careful," she said softly, kissing his palms. "We've come too far to lose each other now." The answer came from an unexpected source. A group of Mexican traders arrived with news that a town called Esperanza, 2 days' ride south, had a doctor, an American who'd fled Texas after helping escaped slaves. He treated anyone who could pay, in coin or trade, and didn't ask questions about mixed marriages or tribal affiliations. "We go," Dakota decided immediately. "Before your time comes." Standing Bear was reluctant to let them leave. The band needed their medicine woman, their warrior. But one look at Ellie's condition decided him. "You return after," he said gruffly. "With a child. We will need new generation to remember our ways." They made the journey slowly, camping under stars that seemed foreign this far south. On the second night, as they rested by a small spring, Ellie felt the first cramping pain. "Not yet," she gasped, gripping Dakota's hand. "It's too early." But nature cared nothing for timing. As the moon rose full and bright, Eleanor Whitfield, runaway bride, adopted Comanche, medicine woman, labored to bring new life into a world that had no place for it. Dakota held her through each pain, whispered prayers in Comanche, sang the old songs his mother had taught him. When she screamed, he screamed with her. When she wept, his tears matched hers. Just as dawn broke, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold, their child entered the world with a cry that echoed off the canyon walls, strong, fierce, announcing their arrival like a warrior. "A daughter," Dakota breathed, cradling the tiny form with infinite tenderness. "Perfect, beautiful." Ellie, exhausted but triumphant, guided the baby to her breast. As their daughter latched on with surprising strength, she looked up at Dakota with eyes full of love and terror and joy. "What do we call her?" He touched the baby's dark hair, so like his own. "In Comanche way, we wait, watch, let her show us her name." He paused, then added softly, "But her American name, what would you choose?" Ellie studied their daughter, this impossible child born of two worlds, under no roof but stars, citizen of nowhere and everywhere. "Hope," she said finally. "Hope Whitfield Dakota, because that's what she is." The journey to Esperanza nearly killed them all. Hope, born too early and too small, struggled to breathe in the dusty air. Ellie, weak from blood loss and unable to ride, lay in a travois Dakota had hastily constructed. Every bump sent fire through her body, but she held their daughter close, willing life into the tiny form with each heartbeat. Dakota walked beside them, leading both horses, his face a mask of desperate determination. He'd wrapped strips of his shirt around his feet when his moccasins wore through, leaving bloody prints in the sand. On the second day, with the sun at its cruelest height, Hope stopped breathing. "No!" Ellie struggled upright despite the pain. Pressing her ear to the baby's chest, the heartbeat was there, faint, fluttering like a trapped moth. But there, Dakota was already moving, taking the child with a gentle urgency. He breathed into her tiny mouth, soft puffs of life, while massaging her chest with 2 fingers, a technique he'd seen the old medicine man use on a drowned child years ago. For eternal seconds. Nothing. Then, a cough, a whimper, a wail that was the sweetest sound Ellie had ever heard. "Fighter," Dakota murmured, cradling Hope against his chest, like her mother. They reached Esperanza as the sun set, painting the small town in shades of dust and gold. It was a rough place, saloons outnumbering churches 3-to-1, populated by those who didn't fit anywhere else, perfect for them. The doctor, William Hartley, was a thin man with kind eyes and steady hands. He took one look at them, the exhausted Comanche warrior, the white woman pale as death, the infant who shouldn't have survived, and asked no questions beyond the medical. "The child needs cow's milk," he said after examination. "The mother needs rest and iron-rich food. And you." He looked at Dakota. "Need to sit before you fall." They had little money, but Dakota traded his rifle and Ellie's knowledge of medicinal herbs. Hartley, impressed by her understanding of native remedies, offered them a bargain. "Stay a month. Help me with patience. Your Spanish is better than mine. And Lord knows we need someone who understands herbs beyond laudanum." He glanced at Hope, sleeping fitfully in a borrowed cradle. The child needs time to grow stronger anyway. 1 month became 2, then 3. Esperanza, for all its roughness, cared little about mixed marriages. Half the population had secrets, and a Comanche white union barely raised eyebrows among the former slaves, Mexican revolutionaries, and Chinese railroad workers who called the town home. Ellie grew stronger, helping Hartley treat everything from gunshot wounds to childbirth complications. Her combination of traditional knowledge and practical skill made her invaluable. Dakota found work at the livery stable, his way with horses earning respect from men who'd otherwise spit at an Indian. Hope thrived, growing round and bright-eyed. She had her father's coloring but her mother's stubborn chin, and her laugh could charm even the sourest drunk. But peace was fragile in a border town. Word came that the Texas Rangers were pushing south, hunting renegade Indians and their sympathizers. The Mexican government, weakened by internal strife, couldn't or wouldn't stop them. "We should go back to the band," Dakota said one night, watching the horizon as if Rangers might appear any moment. "Hope isn't strong enough for that life yet," Ellie protested, though she knew he was right. They were too visible here, too memorable, the white woman with the Indian husband and mixed baby. The decision was made for them when Josiah Crawford rode into town. Ellie recognized him immediately, one of Morrison's hired guns who'd escaped the canyon fight. He sat in the saloon across from the doctor's office, drinking steadily, his eyes never leaving their door. "He's waiting for dark," Dakota said grimly, checking the loads in his pistol, a recent purchase with their saved earnings. "Probably has others coming. We could talk to the sheriff. A Texas lawman, he'd hand you to Crawford gift-wrapped." Dakota pulled her close, hope between them. "We run, tonight." But Crawford wasn't patient. As they prepared to flee, he kicked in their door, whiskey brave and mean. Well, Morrison's runaway whore." His eyes glittered with malice. "You cost me good money when your savage friends killed my partners. Time to collect." He lunged for Ellie, but she was no longer the frightened girl who'd fled in a wedding dress. Months of hard living had given her strength and speed. She dodged, grabbed the hot coffee pot from the stove, and threw the contents in his face. Crawford screamed, clawing at his burns. Dakota moved to finish it, but Hartley appeared in the doorway with a shotgun. "I believe you're disturbing my patients," the doctor said mildly. "That's bad for business." Crawford, half-blind and whimpering, stumbled toward the door. "This ain't over. I'll be back with—" The shotgun blast took him in the chest, throwing him into the street. Hartley lowered the smoking weapon with the same calm he showed surgery. "Self-defense," he said. "Man threatened my nurse and her family. Anyone asks, that's the story." He looked at Dakota. "Though I suggest you folks move on soon. Where there's one rat, there's usually a nest." They left that night, but not alone. Hartley insisted on accompanying them part way, along with two others, Maria, a Mexican woman who'd lost her family to Rangers, and Chen Lu, a Chinese man whose skills with explosives had made him unwelcome on the railroad. "Esperanza's getting too hot anyway," Hartley explained. "Time to find somewhere new." They traveled by moonlight, a strange caravan of outcasts. Hope, now 6 months old, rode in a sling against Ellie's chest, her dark eyes taking in the vast sky with wonder. 3 days out, they found it, a hidden valley with a spring-fed stream, natural caves for shelter, and high walls that could be defended. It was on no map, claimed by no government. "We could make something here," Maria said softly. "A place for people like us." Chen Lu was already calculating. "Irrigation channels here, gardens there, the caves go deep, good storage, good hiding. A town of our own," Hartley mused. "No laws but what we make." Dakota and Ellie exchanged glances. It wasn't the Comanche band, wasn't the white world. It was something new, something unprecedented. "What would we call it?" Ellie asked. Dakota looked at their daughter, who had grabbed his finger with fierce determination. "Esperanza Nueva, New Hope." Over the following months, others found them. Word traveled in whispers among the displaced. There was a valley where a mixed couple was building something different, where former slaves and natives, Mexicans and Chinese, anyone who didn't fit the narrow definitions of civilization, could live free. It wasn't easy. They faced raiders, supply shortages, internal conflicts between people who'd been taught to hate each other. But slowly, painfully, they built. Adobe houses rose alongside traditional wickiups. Gardens blended Mexican, Chinese, and native techniques. Children played together in 3 languages. Ellie served as healer and mediator, her position unique, wide enough to negotiate with supply traders, adopted Comanche enough to understand native grievances, mother to a mixed child who embodied their community's hope. Dakota became their war chief, training defenders who might be former buffalo soldiers or vaqueros or Chinese workers who'd learned to fight to survive. Under his leadership, they repelled 2 raider attacks so decisively that word spread. The valley was protected. On Hope's first birthday, the community gathered for celebration. Standing Bear arrived with a small band of Comanche, having heard rumors of this strange new place. He studied the mixed families, the blended customs, the children who moved seamlessly between worlds. "This is not the old way," he said to Dakota. "No, but perhaps it's a new way worth trying." The old chief was quiet for a long moment, watching Hope toddle between her parents, babbling in a mixture of English, Comanche, and Spanish. "Your mother saw true," he said finally. "You did choose the difficult path, but perhaps—" he almost smiled. "Perhaps the difficult paths lead to interesting places." As night fell over New Hope, Ellie stood with Dakota on the ridge overlooking their valley. Below, cook fires glowed like stars, and the sound of multiple languages blended into a singular song of community. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The old life, the simplicity of one world or the other?" He pulled her close, Hope sleeping between them. "I miss much, but I would trade none of it for this." He kissed her temple. "You?" She thought of wedding dresses and proper society, of rules and restrictions and safety that came with suffocation. Then she looked at their impossible town, their impossible child, their impossible love that had somehow built something real. "Never," she said, and meant it. In the valley below, someone started playing a fiddle, an Irish tune that became Spanish, that became something wholly new. And Eleanor Whitfield, who had fled one life to find another, held her family close and listened to the music of the future being born. 5 years passed in New Hope Valley. The settlement grew from desperate experiment to thriving community. 30 families now called it home. Adobe buildings lined the main street, their walls decorated with Chinese characters, Mexican tiles, and Comanche symbols. The school taught in 4 languages. The weekly market drew traders from 100 miles away, eager for Chen Lu's gunpowder, Maria's woven goods, and Ellie's medicines. Hope had grown into a wild, bright child who rode before she could properly walk and spoke all languages with equal fluency. Her Comanche name, given by Standing Bear on her 3rd birthday, was Soaring Hawk, for the way she climbed everything in sight, fearless as her parents. But even Eden had serpents. The trouble started when Ellie discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy felt different, easier in body but heavier in spirit, perhaps because she now understood the weight of bringing children into their uncertain world. "The Rangers grow bolder," Dakota said one evening, studying reports from their scouts. "They claim we harbor fugitives." "We do," Ellie replied, hand resting on her swelling belly. "Thank God for it." He smiled, but worry creased his brow. "The government in Washington speaks of new treaties, forcing all tribes onto reservations. Our freedom here, it cannot last forever." That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She walked to the ridge where she and Dakota had stood years ago, looking down at what they'd built. The valley slept peacefully, but she felt storm clouds gathering beyond the mountains. "Mama said." Hope's small voice startled her. The child had inherited her father's silent movement. "No, little Hawk, just thinking." She lifted her daughter, groaning slightly at the weight. Soon she'd be too pregnant for such lifting. About the new baby. About many things. Hope was quiet a moment. Then, "Story?" Ellie smiled. Her daughter's hunger for stories was insatiable. "Which one?" "How you and Papa found each other." So Ellie told it again. The wedding dress, the desert, the rescue. She'd sanitized it for young ears, but the heart remained. 2 people from different worlds choosing love over safety. "Will I find someone like that?" Hope asked sleepily. "Maybe. Or maybe you'll forge a completely new path. You're born of 2 worlds. My love, you can choose both, neither, or create your own." As Hope dozed against her shoulder, Ellie saw riders approaching. Dakota returning from patrol with troubling urgency. "Army regiment," he said without preamble. 2 days north, flying a peace banner, but—" he shook his head. "Warriors don't trust peace from soldiers who burned their camps." The next morning, New Hope's council convened. Hartley, gray-haired now but still sharp, argued for negotiation. "We can't fight the U.S. Army. Maybe they'll recognize our town charter. Written under what authority?" Maria interrupted. "We exist in the cracks. Doctor, official recognition means official control." Chen Lu, ever practical, had already begun calculating defensive positions and explosive placements. Standing Bear, who'd moved his remaining band to the valley permanently, simply sharpened his knife in eloquent silence. The army arrived under Colonel James Pemberton, a man whose weathered face suggested he'd seen too much of the frontier's brutal mathematics. He rode in with only a small escort, a gesture of peace or supreme confidence. "I'm looking for Eleanor Whitfield," he announced to the gathered crowd. Ellie stepped forward, Dakota beside her, Hope clutching her skirts. "I'm Eleanor, though it hasn't been Whitfield for years now." The colonel studied them, the white woman in mixed clothing, the Comanche warrior, the obviously mixed child, another baby on the way. His expression was unreadable. "Your father is dead," he said simply. Consumption finally took him, but before he died, he made a confession to the territorial judge. About Morrison forcing your marriage through debt, about the lies told regarding your disappearance. He reached into his jacket, producing official papers. "You've been cleared of any wrongdoing. Morrison's estate, what's left after his creditors, is yours by right." Ellie felt nothing at the news of her father's death, that love had died the night he'd sold her. "I want nothing from that world." "I thought you might say that." Pemberton dismounted, surprising everyone by removing his hat respectfully. "But there's more. The government is reconsidering its approach to settlements like yours, places where different peoples live together peacefully. There's talk of a new program, official recognition, protection even, in exchange for keeping the peace and paying taxes. Chains dressed as gifts," Dakota said coldly. "Perhaps, or perhaps a way to preserve what you've built." The colonel looked around the valley, noting the defensive positions, the armed residents. "I've seen what happens when the army comes in force. It never ends well for anyone. But this could be different." They debated for hours. Some wanted to fight, others to flee deeper into Mexico. But Ellie kept thinking of Hope, of the child growing inside her, of all the children playing in the dusty streets who knew no home but this valley. "We vote," she said finally. "Every adult, regardless of origin, that's our way." The vote was close. 18 for negotiation, 15 against democracy. Messy and imperfect, had spoken. What followed were weeks of careful diplomacy. Papers were drawn up recognizing New Hope as an incorporated town under territorial law. They would pay taxes, submit to federal law and major crimes, allow army inspections. In return, they could maintain their own customs, elect their own officials, and, crucially, no one could be removed based on race or origin. "It's not perfect," Hartley said as they signed the documents. "But it's legal protection." Standing Bear refused to sign, taking his most traditional followers deeper into the mountains. But he left with words for Dakota. "You choose the pen over the rifle. Perhaps you are wiser than I. Time will tell." Ellie gave birth on a storm-wild night, rain turning the streets to mud. This child came easier, a son with his mother's green eyes and his father's strong lungs. They named him Bridge, for what they hoped he might become. The incorporation brought changes. A postal route connected them to the world. Traders came more frequently. Some newcomers arrived seeking the promise of a town where anyone could belong, not all of them understanding what that truly meant. There were growing pains, bar fights between former soldiers and former slaves, arguments over whose customs would prevail in disputes, children caught between worlds, unsure which to claim. But there were triumphs, too. The school produced its first graduates. Mixed marriages became common enough to be unremarkable. Hope learned to read in 4 languages and do arithmetic that impressed even Chen Lu. One evening, as Ellie worked in the clinic, now a proper building with real windows, a familiar figure appeared. It took her a moment to recognize Catherine, her childhood friend from the old ranch. "Ellie, my God, it's really you." Catherine's fine dress was travel-stained, her face older but kind. "When I heard, I had to see for myself." They talked through the night. Catherine had married well, lived comfortably, but confessed a growing emptiness. "Everything I do is what's expected, every word measured, every action proper. You're free. Freedom has its own chains," Ellie said softly, gesturing at the endless work of building a community. "But they're chains I chose." Catherine stayed a week, helping in the clinic, playing with hope and bridge, watching this impossible town function. When she left, she pressed money into Ellie's hands. "For the school," and promised to send supplies. "You did what I never could," she said at parting. "You refused to be what they told you to be." Years blended together. Hope grew tall and fierce, equally comfortable breaking horses with her father or mixing medicines with her mother. Bridge showed a gift for languages and peacemaking, often translating not just words but meanings between the valley's diverse residents. The world changed around them. Railways pushed further west. The frontier officially closed. The old ways, both white and native, faded like morning mist. But new hope endured, evolved, adapted. On their 15th anniversary, Dakota and Ellie renewed their vows, this time with legal papers, a priest, a medicine man, and half the town in attendance. It was unnecessary. Their bond had been forged in deeper fires than any ceremony. But symbols mattered in this new world they were building. That night, as they lay together in the house they'd built with their own hands, children sleeping safely down the hall, community thriving beyond their walls. Dakota asked his old question. Regrets. Ellie traced the new lines on his face, the gray threading his hair, the scars that mapped their shared journey. Only one. He tensed, and she smiled. "That I can't do it all over again." His laughter, rich and free, echoed across the valley where impossible things had taken root and bloomed, where a runaway bride and a Comanche warrior had built something that shouldn't exist but did, a place where love was stronger than law, where family was chosen not assigned, where the future was written by those brave enough to pick up the pen. In the distance, a coyote howled at the rising moon, an old sound in a new world, reminding them that some things endure, transform, and survive against all odds. Just like love, just like hope, just like the small valley where two worlds met and discovered they were not so different after all. Thank you so much for joining us around the campfire tonight and listening to Ellie and Dakota's incredible journey. Their story reminds us that love knows no boundaries and that courage can bloom even in the harshest desert. I'd love to hear where you're listening from tonight, whether you're driving through the wide-open plains, cozied up at home, or maybe even camping under the stars. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of the American frontier, and share your thoughts about this story in the comments below. Did Ellie and Dakota's love story touch your heart? What part of their journey spoke to you? Until we'd meet again around the campfire, keep riding toward your own horizon, partners.